there has been much talk about your comeback. During the bad times of certainly the beginning of '95, I guess, when did the comeback begin, when you began to once again connect?
Well, no, I don't. No, I think this shouldn't be taken out of context. We have had, several patches. We have an average performance of something like 35%
over the last
20 odd years, 26 years. But it's made up of years which are 5% or 8%, and years that are 60% or 100%. That's how you get the average.
Yeah.
And we had 4 wonderful years, 90 to 93 inclusive, right. And 94 we were only up 4%, which was our second worst year. And in the first half of this year, we were actually down when the market was up.
That's what I referred to.
And that was a sort of a bad patch.
But you have said, you're quoted as saying that somehow you began to feel somewhat that the forces were against you, in a sense. I mean, did you...
Well, we just didn't get it right. We had the opportunities were there, and we got caught. And it didn't hang together, but we got it together now.
All right, but stay with me, though. Let me explore this, because there is something, I think, for people to say, what happened when you were on such a roll that you began to hit the rough patch? Right. What did it do to you, and what did it cause you to question, and how did you come out of it?
Well, first of all, I'm immune, because I've now got a young team.
I know.
They do all the work, and I'm very supportive, and I worry for them, but I don't really worry.
Well, Stanley Druckenmiller and people like that have gotten all the credit.
But they took all the pain, right. Because managing money the way we do is extremely painful. A very responsible job and very stressful. And I don't actually feel the stress. If I did, I probably wouldn't be able to sit here and talk to you. So that's number one.
You don't feel the stress anymore because it's not your judgments that are on the line?
I'm not on the line. Right. They are on the line, and I'm just stand behind them. I'm coach,
right.
And they are performing. It's
right.
Of
You're
course,
the coach and Stanley's a quarterback, is that?
Right. So of course I'm involved, you constantly re-examine what you're doing wrong, and you slowly you tentatively get things right. But you can't really get the dynamic going until you have a little profit under your belt, because it's very different when you're risking your principal than when you're risking your profit. So that's how you get these runs, when you get it right, and then you can risk more and make more money. When you have lost it, when you're doing poorly, you've got to retrench. And even as you get it right, you don't get the performance until you can do it on a larger scale, because risking your profit, you see, is much easier.
It's less terrifying than risking your principal.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we have such a good record is because we never lose our principal. Once we get, we are in a bad position, we retrench. So we might lose a little bit, but we'll never endanger
because you leverage well.
That's right. We deleverage when we are not making money.
You stop leveraging. I assume that's what deleveraging means.
Yeah.
But in the sterling coup, which would not coup, in the investment there, where you captured the attention of the world and certainly the Bank of England.
Right.
Did you put $10 billion at risk or not?
Yes.
Now, was that all profit or was that principal?
Well, it was our principal, but it was not all at risk, because the most we could have lost would have been, let's say, 2-3%, because there was no. It was a high reward, low risk bet.
Right.
In other words, if it had gone wrong, we would have had the transaction cost of undoing it. Right. Whereas if we got it right, we made something like 15-20%. So we did put all our equity at risk, but it wasn't. It wasn't really very much of an
risking 10 billion. You were risking a billion or
less, even less.
Even less.
No, substantially less.
Yeah.
We made a billion, but we made more than a billion actually. But we could have lost a few hundred million, which would have been perfectly acceptable.
1995. I want to move past business, but stay with me for a second. In 1995, the beginning of '95, when you began to, it was a rough patch. Did you change your ideas about macro investing and looking at everything at that time, did you call into question any part of your philosophy about investing or your practices over the previous 25 years?
Not the philosophy, not the approach, but every one of our position was very much re-examined.
Yeah.
And actually one of the things we did was to focus more on individual stocks,
yes,
and not just the macro, because the macro is one bet, you
right,
see, whereas if you select particular stocks, you have a thesis concerning an industry or a company, then you have, let's say, a division of risk, so you can do a little more.
Yeah. When your philosophy about equity investments when looking at a company has to do with management, has to do with...
Right now it does,
yeah,
because this is an era of high capitalism, if you like,
yeah,
where the interests of the shareholders rule supreme, and managements pay a lot of attention to the interests of the shareholders. And if you can
and that's a change you find, that there's much more of a sensitivity to shareholders and return to shareholders than been in the past.
That is correct. And therefore, if you can identify managements which are changing their attitude, or where there's a change of management, you can be very well rewarded.
Yeah. You say this is a golden age of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
It continues.
Yes.
What is it about where we are economically in the world, looking at it globally, that makes you optimistic about capitalism?
Well, don't
put words in your mouth.
No, please don't, because I'm not so optimistic. In fact, I'm pretty sure that this golden age is not going to last forever, because it's built on false foundations. We've had a similar period, let's say, at the end of the last century, and it didn't last. You had global markets. Money didn't move as fast as it's moving now, but it moved just as much. It was very similar to what we have today. In fact, it was more stable than what we have today, because first of all, you had the gold standard as opposed to the fluctuating currency system, which is much more unstable that we have now. And secondly, you had an imperial power, England, that was the main beneficiary of this global trading system, you know, the City of London. Yes. And they were perfectly willing to send a gunboat or two to faraway places in order to, you know, put down the native, keep the natives in place.
To maintain the empire.
That's right. We don't have that now, because the United States is the sole remaining superpower, but is not the main beneficiary of this global trading system. And therefore, you know, we can't be the policeman of the world. We can't afford it. We don't want to be. And therefore, there is no policeman. And there is no imperial power. There is no balance of powers as you had during the Cold War, when you had these two superpowers sort of keeping each other in check. So you have a vacuum, a power vacuum. You have instability. And this is actually one of the main points I make in the book. This cannot last like this. We actually need an international security system. And the trouble is that the United Nations has failed just at a time when it would be most needed.
Bosnia being one perfect example.
Bosnia has been to the United Nations as Abyssinia was to the League of Nations in 1935. It showed that the League of Nations doesn't work.
Proved its impotency.
That's right. And this is an issue for us, particularly for the United States, because we created the United Nations. It's our design. We are the leading power. But we say the United Nations failed. They failed. Yeah. It's us that have decided not to.
For a number of reasons, including the fact that the rest of the world, and certainly the Western world, Japan and Europe, Bosnia being one small example, is looking to us for leadership.
Yes.
Is that just a failure of this administration, or a failure of a mindset in America about our role in the world?
I think it's a bipartisan issue.
Right.
I think that the Republicans have to make up their minds whether they want to support the United Nations or not. I think that, and if they don't, you know, what role are we going to play in the world?